If you've been seeing new episodes come out of the podcast every week, I'm sure you'd feel it's a given. I'm sure you feel it's automatic. But honestly, it's been a journey. This episode 100 of the Take Your Business podcast, I never knew I was going to be saying this because it's been. Actually, this podcast started as an extension of the business blog for Target ICT. So it was just after discovering podcasting during the pandemic, that was around 2020. I discovered podcasts, I listened to podcasts, and I felt, okay, yes, I should do one for the business for Target ICT. And I think I've mentioned this on a couple of podcasts too. I had a Toastmasters project back in 2022 or 2023, can't remember which, but that was my level four project, starting a podcast. And that is what took that idea in 2020 into this reality that you're seeing. I was meant to do maybe five or so episodes back then, and now we're already at 100. And it's really funny because this is the same person in front of the camera who never wants to be in front of the camera. But it's okay. So the journey, like I mentioned, it's been a journey. The journey has been interesting. Um, I know the first time I always talk about the mic I started the podcast with. I can't, yeah, I can see it here. So it's like a $3 mic, this mic. And then I realized the audio was really bad because then it wasn't really something I had a long term plan or anything for. But it started, then I realized that mic got a lot of editing, needed a lot of editing. So we got a professional audio technical mic. Then I think some episodes in, we decided to do videos. So if you look at the first few video episodes, they're really funny because we tried everything. Tried phone cameras, tried until I got this camera I'm using right now. I know probably with time I might be dissatisfied and want a newer camera. Then yeah, we had to work on the lighting. Lighting is still in progress, but it's a lot better than the first episodes. The studio, I had to do an actual studio in my home office. This is my home office. So many things. Then I think when we had to start getting guests on, that was really, really, really complicated. And but it was rewarding because that way you don't hear me and my own worldview. You hear different people talking about things that I talk about, but from different angles. So that was rewarding, a bit challenging, but I think I actually prefer guest episodes right now. So I think in the process of getting to this episode 100, I've learned a lot of lessons. One lesson I've always had since I started my first business back in 2010, and that is just that you can never have everything figured out. You can never have the whole plan. You can never. A lot of times, and they call it paralysis analysis. You just end up getting paralyzed, making all sorts of analysis, all sorts of projections. Just that. Another thing is stay consistent. I've been on a journey in the past few years, and what has really helped me in this journey is something I wrote on my whiteboard. My whiteboard is just by my right hand side here, and it's consistency in red ink at the top of the whiteboard, and it's really helped in every aspect. Then I think another lesson I learned, it's been with me all this while, but this podcast really hit it more into me, is when you face problems, don't run away from them. Just keep fixing those problems and grow into a bigger person because of these problems that you fixed. So the podcast has improved me a lot as a person. I'm a bit more comfortable in front of the camera compared to the first times. And I had to do a lot of takes to do the first few episodes, but I'm getting better. Not perfect, but there's something I say that perfection, there is no perfection, but we always strive for it. So we always strive to go as close to perfection as we can. I remember I used to be tense at the beginning when we had guest episodes. I used to tell people that if I have a guest episode by 3 p.m., I probably won't be able to do any work till 3 p.m. because I'll be so tense, catastrophizing, thinking of everything that could have gone wrong. Yeah, and over time, the podcast, I believe, from my perspective, has the conversations are a lot better. I remember then I used to over prepare. We used to have the scripts and all that, but these days, just try to have a conversation between two friends in a coffee shop. So I think the conversations are deeper. I'm able to listen more, listen much better than before, and yeah, it's been, like I said, it's been a source, a really good source of personal growth because there's one thing I talk about in building your confidence, and that's stacking small wins. And this podcast was a really big part of it because at the point where I started the podcast, I was like 2 years, I think a year or 2 years into rebuilding from a really annoying situation. Call it that. So this really, that's why this podcast is really special to me because it's been a really big part of getting out of what I was getting out of. Then if you listen to podcasts, other podcasts I've been on, I think I've talked about that once or twice. So, doing this podcast, especially getting guests on the show, because after the first, I think, 10 episodes, I started having people email, reach out. I still have that a lot now. Reach out that they want to be guests on the podcast, and we decided to explore that. And it has been a rewarding journey because I've actually met a lot of interesting business people from all over the world. Met a lot of people through the podcast, people probably who listen to the podcast and maybe they wanted to connect, and I met them, and it's been rewarding because end of the day, I'm still an introvert. Yeah, I'm in front of the camera like I wasn't 2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago, but I'm still an introvert. I don't like going out. I don't really enjoy socializing. I'm mostly home, gym, or walking. I don't really socialize that much. So I think this one where I get to meet people I won't have met on a normal day. So it's been really rewarding that way because I've met people from practically all continents. I've met people from Asia, Australia, North America, South America, Europe, yeah, Africa, everywhere. So it just makes me realize that people from all over, just basically we all have the same issues, the same thoughts, the same limiting beliefs and everything, and it just makes everything so interesting. And I think apart from that, especially from people who have had on the podcast, who have podcasts, I've been able to get on a few podcasts to share my story. I know at first when I started doing that, it seemed so difficult because I used to feel I couldn't get answers to questions off the cuff just like that. But it's easier than I thought, and I think that goes back to what I said before about just starting. You won't know if you don't start. You might just be limiting yourself in your head. You might actually be good at that thing that you're afraid of. Then I think apart from that, too, it's been and getting other podcasts has been quite an adventure, and it's been easy for me because my life has been an adventure actually. The last few years, the last um 10, 15, 20 years of my life have been a very interesting adventure. I have so many stories to tell, so many stories I've not told from there yet, and I've been on over 20 podcasts. So I have a lot to say, I have a lot to share from my life. So at first, the podcast was started to answer client questions, which you usually do through the blog, because usually we just make a blog post and send this blog post across to clients if they have questions. But as it's growing, I'm starting to see it differently. I'm starting to see the podcast as a resource for business owners, a resource for people who are interested in technology. I want a place where those who don't want to get left behind can log into once a week or once in a while, and they're up to date on what's relevant, on what's good with their industries. And I'm doing this by carefully selecting the guests who come on the podcast, making sure that these guests have depth, they have knowledge in whatever they want to share, and they're able to offer value. So I think as a result of that, we probably let only like 10 to 20% of the guests who want to come on as a result of that. Then apart from that too, I make sure that the topics that are covered on the podcast, both in the solo episodes, it's been a while we did a solo by the way, and in the guest episodes, are useful to the real world. I honestly thought we'll run out of topics before we get to this episode 100, honestly, because I was thinking, I think by episode 20 or 30, I'm like, oh, haven't we talked about everything? But when you look at it, we have more scheduled. This episode 100, I actually have a couple of episodes, almost 10 or thereabouts, scheduled ahead. So that's a lot of growth, that's a lot of content. Currently, we're releasing episodes twice a week, though it's a weekly podcast. And I'm doing this because we have a lot of interviews, especially from Podmatch, where we been getting guests for the past 2 months or 3 months or thereabout. So we're releasing this twice a week, so the episodes are still fresh, especially with technology. You know, technology changes so fast, so you might say something today, and in 2 weeks it's not really relevant anymore. So we're trying to release everything fast. Then by the end of the year, we'll be launching a new podcast by the end of the year, hopefully. So by then we'll go back to once a week, so we'll be able to focus on the second podcast. So I've had people reach out, especially on LinkedIn, where I'm most active, with feedback, with thanks for things they've learned. Especially, I know I had a lot of that from the episode on cybersecurity, the episode on bank scams. So if you have any feedback, if you any of the episodes impacted you, if you feel there's something that we need to cover or need to talk about that we've not talked about, feel free to reach out. I'm a chill person. I'm very friendly. I might delay in reply messages because I get a lot of them, but I always do. I always get around to that. So I just want to say thank you to the listeners, to the guests, all the guests we've had, to all those who've supported me, supported Target ICT, supported the Tech Your Business podcast through this journey, to everyone who in one way or the other has contributed to the podcast success, to my producer, to everyone who has contributed to the podcast. So like I said before, if you have any feedback, if you have any questions, if you have if you're grateful for anything you've learned, if you have any ideas for future episodes, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn, any of the social media. LinkedIn most likely you get me directly, but any other social media you get a response definitely. So I think I don't want this to be too long. We have this episode 100. Like I say, we have 99 other episodes. I'm so happy to say this. So I don't think you'll be able to listen to all of them before the end of the week, because they are mostly between 30 minutes and 1 hour. So if you're listening to 99 episodes of an hour each, that's 99 hours. If you're listening to 30 minutes each, that's like 40, 50, 49 point something, 49.5 hours of the Tech Your Business podcast. So schedule as much as you want, listen through them, take notes of what you learned, let me know, let us know what can be improved, how we can be better. And till the next episode 101, don't forget to keep taking your business, and thank you.